Do you want to hike to the wave or the subway or maybe be a wedding photographer, but you're concerned that physically you might not be able to do it? Keep watching and I'll explain how to overcome those physical limitations so you can just focus on being creative. Let's begin this video with an important disclaimer. The recommendations expressed in this video are not intended to replace the advice from your physician or healthcare team. The intent of this video is to stimulate critical thinking about your health and your physical ability to continue making photographs up until the time of your death. Just like Irving Penn, who lived to be 92 years of age. I take no responsibility, nor do I assume liability or indemnification for any injury or death that results from following these recommendations for health-related fitness. While physical activity is safe for most people, it is always best to consult your physician prior to beginning any physical fitness training program. If you're thinking, me? Go see a doctor? No way! I'd never do that. I feel great. I'm healthy enough. Bring on the Rocky Balboa training program. If this sounds like you, at the very least, use the Physical Activity Readiness Questionnaire, PARQ Plus for short, for a quick self-assessment screen to determine if you are cleared to begin physical activity. If you answer no to all of these questions, the assumption is that you are ready to participate in physical activity with minimal risk for a heart attack or sudden cardiac death. Now that we've got the serious stuff out of the way, let's talk about how to optimize your ability to be an active and productive photographer for the long term. To understand how to do this, we have to define two guiding overarching training principles: specificity and overload. As you might imagine, there are many different ways to train, and they all have specific purposes. Pun intended. In exercise science, training specificity states that if you want to maximize your training results, so you want to be the best you can be at a specific movement, muscles need to be conditioned in a manner similar to which they are to perform, including the exact pattern of movement. For example, if you want to excel at cycling, you need to train by cycling. If you want to be great at the barbell bench press, then you need to train with the barbell bench press. This principle is also important in rehabilitation programs where the goal may be to help someone enhance their activities of daily living that have a specific pattern of movement, like brushing your teeth. While there is no specific training machine designed to specifically enhance a photographer's ability to take pictures, this principle is more relatively important when I discuss the differences among aerobic, muscular, and flexibility fitness. Hang in there, we'll get to that soon. A second important principle, no matter what type of training that you decide to perform, is that of overload. In order to achieve an increase in physical and physiological function, the body must be stressed with exercise beyond an individual critical level. In other words, you have to persistently challenge yourself above what you would normally do throughout the day. If the training stimulus is fixed, then the training adaptations will plateau and no increase in physical function will occur. So if you want to get better at a task, you need to practice and persistently challenge yourself. Now that we understand what specificity and training overload are, we can define what it means to be physically fit from a scientific point of view so that we can make sense of the training recommendations. And no, that doesn't involve consulting with a social media influencer with six-pack abs. That is the last place we should be getting our health advice from. Don't worry, I'll make this super easy to understand. In exercise science, we break physical fitness down into four components. The first of which is body composition. In other words, how much fat versus muscle tissue does someone carry? In general, a body fat between 10 to 22% for men and 20 to 32% for women is considered satisfactory for health. About 2/3 of American adults are beyond these ranges, making them overweight or obese. Let's be clear. This is not a I want to look salacious in my bikini or Speedo issue, but rather it is a health problem. It has been well established in the scientific literature that if excess fat is centrally located around the waist, there is an increased risk for chronic diseases like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood levels of cholesterol and fat, and stroke. All bad things that will limit or prevent you from enjoying photography. Think about this. Would you intentionally carry heavy, non-working photography equipment with you everywhere you went? That's exactly what happens with being overweight or obese. You've got excess baggage that necessitates more energy and effort to do the same task as someone who is of healthy weight. Now add all that ridiculously huge and heavy camera gear to your load, and that just spells exhaustion. Consider this. Just carrying 20 to 35% of your body weight in the form of a backpack or other load increases energy expenditure and the bulk movement of air in and out of the lung, or more precisely minute ventilation, by about 10%. In addition, movement economy decreases because the load changes the biomechanics, or simply put, the way we move. The takeaway message is that being overweight or obese in combination with carrying around camera gear will force you to need more snacks, more water, and greater physical conditioning to offset those loads. Carrying excess fat simply exacerbates the challenges. Okay, Tony, I get it. Body composition is important if I want to be a photographer for life. But how do I know if I'm overweight or obese? Aside from standing in front of the mirror naked, there are a number of techniques available to help estimate a person's body fat. Some are pretty good, and others should be taken with a grain of salt. I have a video on my academic YouTube channel that I'll put in the description if you're interested in learning more about this topic. If you want to have your body composition assessed, I would recommend reaching out to your local college or university that has an exercise science or kinesiology program. Oftentimes, they will offer up services to the public and sometimes may be looking for test subjects, if you dare. You could also reach out to your local fitness club, but I would screen the fitness staff's credentials carefully to ensure their aptitude in administering the assessment. The take-home message here is that photographers with body fat percentages outside of the ranges satisfactory for health should consider the benefits associated with shedding this excess weight. The second component of fitness is cardiovascular endurance, also known as aerobic exercise. If you're a landscape photographer, then you are probably no stranger to this type of movement. Every time you go hiking, no matter if it's a half a mile or 10 miles, you are challenging your body's heart, lung, blood vessels, and muscles to sustain a higher output beyond sitting at your desk editing photos in photo editing software. If you're a wedding photographer, you are experiencing those same stressors with the added pressure of not missing those critical shots like the groom's first look upon their bride in their wedding dress. Maybe the second shooter got it? Oh man, that's pressure. The point being is that if you want to be a photographer with mobility and endurance so you don't miss those indelible shots, you need good cardiovascular fitness. Okay, Tony, so how do I do that? Well, all you have to do is follow the FIT principle, which stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type of exercise. You gotta love aptly named acronyms, right? Let's break these down using the American College of Sports Medicine's recommendation on exercise for health-related fitness. The recommendation for the letter F, that is frequency or how many times per week you should do cardiovascular exercise, is 5 times per week of moderate intensity exercise or 3 days per week of vigorous exercise for most adults. You could also mix it up and do a combination of moderate and vigorous intensity work 3 to 5 days per week. Variety is the spice of life, right? The letter I, that is intensity or how hard you work during your exercise bout, should be of moderate to vigorous intensity for most adults. What do moderate and vigorous intensities look like? Well, that's going to be dependent on your current physical conditioning. There are several fancy techniques that you can use to gauge your intensity during exercise, but here's a simple one to get you going that's been validated with many peer-reviewed research studies. It's called the talk test. If you can talk but not sing, then you are likely doing moderate intensity exercise. Activities such as hiking or walking at a normal pace through fields and hillsides with no load, doubles tennis, or a leisurely bike ride of less than 10 miles per hour are all considered moderate intensity exercises. If you can only say a few words before pausing for a breath, then you are likely doing high intensity exercise. Activities such as cycling at 12 to 13 miles per hour that require some effort, running at 4 miles per hour, or hiking with a ridiculously huge large format camera backpack are all examples of what is considered high intensity exercise. If you'd like to look up more activities and their intensity ratings, I'll leave a link to the Compendium of Physical Activities in the description. You'll just need to know one piece of information to make sense of it all. Metabolic equivalents, or METs for short, are how exercise scientists measure the intensity value of activity. So when you see MET values between 3.0 to 5.9 METs, that is moderate intensity, while MET values between 6.0 to 8.7 METs are high intensity. Let's move on to the letter T, which stands for time, or how long an activity should be performed. The recommendation is that most adults accumulate either 30 to 60 minutes per day of moderate intensity exercise, 20 to 60 minutes per day of vigorous intensity exercise, or some combination of moderate and vigorous intensity work to achieve target exercise volumes. The interesting part about achieving the total time of each exercise bout is that it can be broken into smaller segments throughout the day. Research has shown that exercise bouts of at least 10 minutes each throughout the day are additive and provide the same salubrious benefits as if the exercise was done continuously. So if you only have 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, and 10 minutes in the evening, that's okay. That's still a total of 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise. Great job! That's going to keep you clicking that shutter button. The last letter T in the FIT principle stands for type of exercise. This is where you get to choose aerobic activities that you enjoy and are willing to continue doing to help increase and maintain your cardiovascular fitness. If you hate running, but someone tells you that it's the best exercise to get you fit, that doesn't mean it's right for you and that you have to be a runner. Everyone enjoys different activities. The key is to pick the ones that make it feel like it's not even exercise. It's just downright fun. With that said, research does support doing aerobic activities that are rhythmic and involve using large muscle groups like your legs in order to maximize the results. As photographers, we also have to lift ridiculously heavy camera gear like the Nikon Nikkor 150mm SW lens and be able to do it repeatedly. This is where the third component of fitness, muscular strength and endurance, is paramount to our long-term ability of continuing to clicking the shutter. Stronger people have a significantly lower risk of dying prematurely of all causes, including cardiovascular disease and cancer at any age. So this is not an area of fitness you want to ignore, no matter if you're 20 or 90 years old, male or female. We need strength training, period. But Tony, I don't have that kind of time. Don't worry, the amount of strength or resistance training volume is surprisingly smaller than you might think to achieve and maintain health-related fitness. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends that the training frequency be 2 to 3 days per week for each major muscle group, with at least 48 hours between training sessions for the same muscle group using proper technique. A training stimulus sufficient for keeping us photographers capable of holding a Canon R5C with the 85mm 1.2 L series lens in our hands can be achieved by performing 8 to 12 challenging repetitions using anywhere from 1 to 4 sets per major muscle group with 2 to 3 minutes of rest between sets. Challenging is the key word here. If you finish 12 reps and can say to yourself, that was pretty easy, I could have done 30 of those, then you're probably not doing a heavy enough weight. The idea is that the weight or resistance you select should keep you in the 8 to 12 repetition range. No more and no less. If you can only do 3 repetitions, then the weight is likely too heavy. Keep your repetitions in the 8 to 12 range and you'll be on your way to a lifetime of carrying around the Mamiya RB67. It is noteworthy that for older and severely deconditioned individuals, a higher repetition range may initially be more appropriate to reduce the risk of a musculotendinous injury. With that said, as the individual adapts to resistance training, it is perfectly acceptable to slowly increase the resistance to achieve an 8 to 12 repetition range over time in these more vulnerable populations. Okay, Tony, but how do I know how many sets I should do? Well, if you're new to resistance training, then just 1 set will help you improve your muscular strength and endurance, assuming that you consistently strength train 2 to 3 days per week. As you advance in your abilities, progressively increasing the number of sets to 4 will be more efficient at helping you keep your muscles appropriately challenged, assuming you're using a sufficient amount of resistance or weight. What do I do about equipment? What do I use? Select modalities that you enjoy, whether they be machine weights, free weights, resistance bands, etc., or a combination of techniques. As long as you're challenging your muscles beyond what they normally experience throughout the day, that's all that matters. Just keep in mind that sometimes you might have to select certain exercises based on your abilities, and that's okay too. There's no need to overthink this. That's like debating whether film or digital is better. They're 2 different mediums that still accomplish the same thing: a photograph. The 4th component of fitness is flexibility. This is the ability to move an articulation or joint through its intended range of motion. This is kind of like moving the zoom ring on your lens from 15 to 35 millimeters. If sand gets trapped in the mechanism, you won't be able to rotate the ring through its full range. So we need to stretch to keep ourselves fluid. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends that we perform flexibility exercises targeting all of the major muscle tendon groups greater than 2 to 3 days per week, while holding the stretch to a point of mild discomfort for 10 to 30 seconds. The goal is to perform 2 to 4 sets of stretching to accumulate about 60 seconds of total stretch time per muscle tendon group. Basic static stretching, where you hold a stretch for 10 to 30 seconds, is sufficient to see improvements in range of motion for most adults, especially if you do them every day. However, there are several other types of flexibility exercises that may be more appealing or appropriate for you. I've put them on the screen for you, but reviewing these modalities goes way beyond the scope of this video. Have you ever found yourself trying to take a photograph on uneven ground and felt that one misstep might land you several feet away from where you were standing? Well, that's where the bonus component of fitness of neuromotor exercise comes into play. The term neuromotor exercise is just a fancy way of saying balance, coordination, and agility training, which, as you might imagine, becomes more important as we age. You may have heard of social influencers referring to this type of exercise as functional fitness training. The truth is that at the time of making this video, we don't have much research data in this area to give specific exercise recommendations. But we do know that this type of training on at least 2 to 3 days per week that accumulate to at least 60 minutes per week is effective. If balance and coordination are a concern, then it is advisable to include this kind of training into your routine so you don't lose your balance and fall over at a wedding trying to get that epic shot of the bride. It's time to make sense of these training recommendations in the context of being a photographer. How do we use the principles of training specificity and overload that I mentioned at the beginning of this video to help optimize my physical performance as a photographer in the most efficient manner? To illustrate this, I'm going to use what I consider to be the 2 most physically demanding types of photographers: landscape and wedding photographers. Let's begin with the landscape photographer. Oftentimes, landscape photographers are hiking for hours at a time over rough and uneven terrain in a variety of weather conditions, all while carrying ridiculously heavy camera gear, food, and water. That's all in a physical effort to getting to your shooting location, where you now have to be mentally composed to be creative. So we need to maximize all of the components of fitness to minimize the accumulated physical fatigue of our hike so that we can still be mentally capable of doing photography. While every landscape photographer will have niche differences, in general, here are some goals. Number 1, keep your dead weight as low as possible. The more dead weight you carry, the higher the accumulation of fatigue. One way to decrease dead weight is to alter your body composition such that there is a higher percentage of muscle weight versus fat weight. For some individuals, doing that through lifestyle changes such as diet and exercise will work remarkably well. In more complicated cases of disease like obesity, medications and/or bariatric surgery may be the best route, owing to dysfunctional hunger and satiation signals that can't be fixed with diet and exercise. Just remember not to let stigmas, shaming, or stereotypes get in the way of you getting the help you need so you can be a participant of photography and not a bystander. Dead weight also comes in the form of all of the stuff we carry on our hikes. Gear lovers will be ecstatic to hear that you can make a significant difference in energy efficiency by investing in the lightest gear you can afford. Cameras, lenses, backpacks, clothing, shoes, etc. Question everything attached to your body and that you carry in your hands. Replacing these items with lightweight counterparts will save you at least 10% of your total energy so that you don't crash before you are ready to. Every ounce counts and has a cumulative fatiguing effect. The challenge is finding the right combination of items that provide you with the tools you need. If you'd like to see how I accomplished getting my 8x10 large format kit under 30 pounds, I'll leave a link to my gear-filled video in the description. Number 2, improve your cardiovascular fitness. Hiking is a form of walking, so it goes without saying that being able to walk for long periods of time and distances mimics the pattern of movement used in hiking the closest. So walking is a great way to supercharge your cardiovascular fitness so that the physical part of hiking becomes a non-issue for you. Carrying your gear does increase the physical demand on your body, so you might consider doing shorter walks carrying all the gear you plan on taking with you on your hikes. I think it's important to remember that if you're planning on doing a very strenuous hike like the subway at Zion National Park, there's really no way of regularly training to prepare you 100%. You'd have to complete that hike several times a week to increase your performance significantly. But you can still be physically capable of going on that hike without having a mule carry your gear or be carried out by your hiking buddies. But Tony, what if I enjoy other cardiovascular exercise modalities like cycling or rowing? Those are great aerobic activities as well. All forms of cardiovascular work serve to increase the ability of your heart and blood vessels to push larger volumes of blood through circulation, which allows the working muscles to have what they need to keep you going and photographing. The difference is that the pattern of motor unit recruitment or muscle fibers used won't match the pattern of recruitment used in hiking. That's okay. It just means that you might feel a little bit more challenged during the hike, but it shouldn't cause you to feel like you are completely out of shape. There is some overlapping training effect. Number 3. Do resistance training. While it may seem sufficient training to just walk around with your heavy backpack, the truth is that you are not challenging the strongest of muscle fibers involved in helping you perform specific functional tasks. Muscle fibers are recruited by the amount of load sensed by receptors in the muscles. If you don't lift heavier objects, you'll never recruit those stronger muscle fibers. This results in a disadvantage when it comes to carrying around all that ridiculously heavy camera gear. Muscles just won't be optimized for lifting heavier loads through a full range of motion, increasing the likelihood of not being able to complete a task or, worse yet, an injury. Let's use the example of stepping onto a 16-inch high boulder with your backpack so you can photograph that gnarly looking tree from the perfect angle. This motion requires heavy use of the quadriceps and gluteus maximus muscles, so your thigh and butt muscles respectively. If you haven't been training these muscles under load and in a way that mimics the motion of stepping up onto a boulder, this task could potentially be a major struggle for you, which will subsequently contribute to the accumulating fatigue from the physical work of hiking. That just means you're going to poop out sooner and feel exhausted compared with someone who works on all of their components of fitness. Performing weighted lunges or squats would more optimally and efficiently prepare you for executing these kinds of movements with ease and help minimize the contribution to the accumulation of overall fatigue. Remember that the less fatigued you are, the more you can concentrate on creating exciting images with your camera. Number 4, stay flexible. Have you ever had a gust of wind knock your field notes out of your hand and onto the ground? And then you thought, dang, I've got to reach down and pick that up. I hope I don't pull something. Range of motion improvements by stretching can help improve your stability to take full advantage of the motion that each joint has to offer and helps minimize the risk for a musculotendinous injury. Staying flexible helps keep you limber and more capable of performing activities without limitation. For example, what if your camera is up high and you need to shield your lens from the sun? You might decide that holding your hat as a flag near the lens is your best bet. But what if your shoulder range of motion is poor? You might not be able to maximally flex your shoulders so that you can shield your lens from the sun. While the issues preventing you from doing this movement may be more complicated than what stretching can fix, the point is, give yourself the mechanical advantage of having full range of motion whenever you can by stretching. I would recommend seeing a physical therapist for problems extending beyond a simple lack of flexibility fitness. What about us wedding photographers, Tony? How does all this exercise science talk apply to me? Wedding photography can definitely be physically and mentally stressful. You've only got one opportunity to get this right, and you don't want to miss anything. You need to be everywhere at once. It's a marathon with plenty of sprinting in between. Whew. I think I'm having tachycardia just talking about it. I'm going to need a moment. Okay, I'm good. Essentially, all the goals from being a landscape photographer apply to being a wedding photographer, especially if you're the sole photographer. Keep your dead weight as low as possible, improve your cardiovascular fitness, do resistance training, and stay flexible. However, there are 2 areas that would need refinement as far as training specificity goes. The constant movement throughout the day, interspersed with bouts of increased intensities, would favorably benefit from an interval type of training program. This involves varying the exercise intensity at specific intervals during an aerobic exercise session. Typically, you would alternate short bouts of vigorous to near maximal intensity exercise with equal or longer bouts of light to moderate intensity exercise. For example, you could perform 6 minutes of walking at 4 miles per hour, followed by sprinting at 10 miles per hour for 30 seconds, and repeat this cycle 3 or 4 times. Just remember to ease your way into this type of training because it does increase your risk for a musculotendinous injury if you go too hardcore with it too quickly. Mix it in occasionally with your main cardiovascular exercise routine. The other area of training specificity relates to resistance training. Everyone works differently with their gear, so it's important to analyze the motions you use when operating your camera, and then determining what resistance exercise mimics that motion the best. For example, maybe you like to extend your arms above your head to get a higher vantage in your shots. An overhead press using machine weights, free weights, or resistance bands can help strengthen the tendons and muscles that help you execute that motion, making it just about effortless to get that shot. You might not even need image stabilization in your camera body or lens. Perhaps you like getting down low for your shots to make your bride look larger than life. Imagine not having to kneel and stand back up every time you take one of these shots, but rather you simply drop comfortably into a squatted position. What could help with that? You guessed it, doing some kind of relatively deep squat. Just remember, that doesn't mean you have to lift ridiculously heavy. Just keep your load adjusted so that you can perform 8 to 12 repetitions. And of course, don't forget proper technique. That's paramount to safety and training effectiveness. Speaking of safety, every exercise session should include the following sequence to your routine to minimize the risk for a cardiovascular or musculotendinous injury. You wouldn't want to show up to a wedding shoot and try to figure out how you're going to light the bride and with what equipment on the spot, right? You have to think about your approach ahead of time and get warmed up with inspiration. Same thing with your body. Always begin with a 5 to 10 minute warm-up of light to moderate intensity activity to increase blood flow and temperature of the exercising limbs. This is followed by your conditioning or training part of your routine, as we outlined earlier with all of the American College of Sports Medicine's recommendations. Next, a cool down period of at least 5 to 10 minutes of light to moderate intensity activity to allow for a gradual recovery of heart rate and blood pressure and clearance of metabolic end products from the exercising muscles. It is best to stretch after the warm-up phase or immediately after the cool down phase to avoid a musculotendinous injury. Wow, knowledge really is power, especially when you can apply it to change your health for the better and increase the likelihood that you'll keep clicking that shutter for decades to come. Only you can decide whether or not it is time to stop being sedentary or build upon your current fitness level. The exercise recommendations in this video are intended to help you achieve a fitness level that will improve your overall health and physical ability to be a photographer by minimizing physical limitations. Please be aware that if you are interested in increasing your performance for a specific sport, you'll need a training regimen beyond those recommendations in this video. Let me put my registered dietitian nutrition hat on for a moment. Diet is unequivocally an important part of helping us maintain good health, so we can continue to be creative with our cameras. As long as you don't have any special dietary needs or restrictions, the best philosophy is just to keep it simple. If you are looking to lose weight, take what you are eating now and just eat a little bit less. Maybe use an 8-inch plate instead of a 10-inch plate, so that the amount of food you are eating looks like a more satisfying portion. Try to incorporate more fruits and vegetables into your diet because they are loaded with nutrients, have antioxidants, don't have a lot of calories, and contain fiber, which will keep you feeling full for a longer period of time. If you are exercising on a regular basis, you need complex carbohydrates, regardless of what you hear on social media. Just study the human physiology of glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain, and you'll realize that the carbohydrate haters are full of verbal diarrhea. Yes, protein is important, but super easy to get in a mixed diet. Just remember to go lean with your protein and not choose sources with a high amount of saturated fat, which can increase your risk for heart disease. This video would be ridiculously longer than it already is, so I won't get into more detail about nutrition because this is an exercise video. If you are interested in learning more about how to improve your diet, consult a registered dietitian nutritionist that is licensed in your state for more information. I really appreciate you for making it this far into this ridiculously long video. I've been wanting to make this video for about 10 years now, so it feels great to combine two of my passions into work that will hopefully help some of you keep on photographing for a lifetime. If you found this content useful, please consider supporting my channel by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel if you haven't already done so, and sharing a fitness story with all of us. You could also click on any of the Amazon links in the description, search Amazon for an item you're interested in, and purchase that item to support me with a commission from Amazon that costs you absolutely nothing. As always, thanks for watching.